is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
You got 3 full-time assistants, you got ops, you got development people, you got GAs, and you got people on campus that are in charge of your academics. As a junior college coach, you do all that. You're in charge, which is the great part about being a junior college coach, is you learn how to do that. You learn how to do all those different areas. When you're on a staff of 2 people, I mean, it's you and them. You guys got to figure it out. I think it's really, really good for overall growth. You learn about all areas, whether it's about getting an international kid in or whatever it may be, stuff that you're not going to deal with more than likely at the higher levels, the bigger staffs. So I think it can be very beneficial.
Kyle Cooper is entering his 3rd season as the head men's basketball coach and athletic director at Howard College. In his first 2 years, the Hawks had a 37-23 record. They also had NJCAA All-Americans in back-to-back years and sent 10 players to play at the NCAA Division I level. Cooper has helped players to compete at the SEC, SWAC, A10, Southland, Sunbelt, Big Sky, Summit, and SWAC. Cooper came to Howard after 1 year as an assistant coach at Tarleton State University. Before Tarleton, Cooper served as the head men's basketball coach at Western Texas College. In his 2 years there, the Westerners had back-to-back Region 5 tournament appearances, multiple wins against nationally ranked opponents, and several appearances in the NJCAA national rankings, and an overall record of 38-19. Before his time at Western Texas, Cooper spent 1 season as the top assistant coach at Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College. Cooper broke into the coaching industry in 2011 and spent his first 6 seasons as an assistant and associate head coach for North Iowa Area Community College, where he also played and was a first-team All-Region player. Hey, Hoopheads, Dr. Dish's 4th of July sale is here. From now until July 31st, 2025, you can save up to $4,000 on the top shooting machines chosen and trusted by thousands of coaches across the United States. Secure your Dr. Dish CT Plus, All-Star Plus, or Rebel Plus while supplies last. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com and follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mention the Hoopheads podcast and save an extra $300 on the Dr. Dish Rebel, All-Star, and CT models. Those are some great deals, Hoopheads. Get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
Hi, this is Jason Franzen from Third Side Basketball Academy, and you're listening to the Hoopheads podcast.
Have your notebook ready as you listen to this episode with Kyle Cooper, head men's basketball coach at Howard College. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads podcast. It's Mike Cleansing here without my co-host Jason Sunkel tonight, but I am pleased to be joined by Kyle Cooper, head men's basketball coach at Howard College in the state of Texas. Kyle, welcome to the Hoopheads pod.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I'm excited.
Excited to have you on. Thrilled to be able to talk to you, learn a little bit more about you and your career. Want to start by going back in time to when you were a kid. Tell me about your first experiences with the game of basketball. What made you fall in love with it? What do you remember about some of those first days with the game of basketball?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it was probably watching my dad play. Like when I was little, my dad he was a good player. And he would still play at that time and city league games and that kind of thing. So when I was little, I'd go watch him play a couple times a week. He coached some. So I really got into it that way. And that's kind of how I developed the love for the game, just being around it. And you're around it so much.
Yeah, I think when you have a family influence, right? A parent, in this case, somebody who drags you along, for lack of a better way of saying it, and you get an opportunity to be exposed to the game. When you're watching your dad and you think about that experience, did watching him play or the way that he played, did that eventually find its way into the way that you played? Did you find yourself trying to emulate your dad as you got a little bit older?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things coming up. I was always kind of compared to him from where I was from. I mean, 'cause he was a really good player. I mean, I think he held the high school I was at originally. He held the scoring record and the rebound record, and he held a lot of stuff. So, I mean, growing up, you always hear you're not going to be as good as your dad. You know what I mean? You just hear that. You hear that constantly. So that's kind of you're constantly trying to fight to be better than him. You know what I mean? So growing up, yeah, that was something constantly you're trying to emulate him, look up to him, and then hopefully become better.
So did you ever compete against your dad? I know for me, growing up when I was a little kid, so I'm talking, whatever, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade maybe, my dad and I'd be out on the driveway, and I remember I'd get mad at him and I'd tell him he'd have to play with one hand behind his back and all these different things. And then eventually I got to the point where I could beat him. And I think it was hard for him for maybe a day. And then he realized, hey, I did something right, because Mike ended up being a fairly good player. So just, do you remember kind of battling with your dad in the driveway or anything along those lines?
Yeah, it was pretty much every night, to be honest with you. Like when we were younger, a lot of horse, I would say. We played one-on-one when I kind of got in that middle school age, that kind of thing. He would never let me win, which is something I think is pretty cool. Like he would never let me win. And then I got to where I'm almost in high school, and I started to where I could beat him pretty consistently. You know what I mean? Then it turned into more horse games. But even then, they were always extremely competitive, and then we bonded through that a lot, I think. You know what I mean? So that's something I really enjoyed those times.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's one of the most underrated things about being a parent of an athlete is the amount of time that you get to spend with your kids. I know I always cherish the time that now as a parent, when I get a chance to go to the gym and rebound for my kids or just put together a workout for them. And as you're doing that, you're talking and you're having conversations, you're getting to know them and be able to spend that time with them. It's time that you never get back. And I think sometimes, especially in today's world, the way the basketball landscape is people get so focused on what's next. And, you know, I'm in middle school and I'm worried about where I'm going to go to high school or if I'm going to start. And if I'm in high school, I'm worried about where am I going to go to college. And sometimes we forget, both as parents and obviously kids sometimes too, that you got to enjoy that moment that you're in. It sounds like you definitely had that with your dad. As you think about yourself trying to become a better player when you were in high school, what did you do to work on your game as a high school player? Were you in the gym by yourself? Were you trying to find pickup games? How are you going about trying to improve?
Yes, originally, I was from a town of 500 people. So like we're constantly like playing outside. There would be some pickup games here and there, but again, I got to credit my dad for, like, as far as us making that leap. You know, I would go to where I would start playing travel AAU basketball, and before you know it, you get noticed by one of the Nike sponsored teams. So then you're doing that whole circuit deal and that kind of thing. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where it was. But back when I was playing, it was a lot of outside. You're just driving around looking for someone out there. Hey, you want to play twos? You want to play full court? You know, that kind of deal was really how a lot of it was. You know, if not that, it was just me by myself all the time.
Obviously a different era than the kids that you're coaching today, who can go on and they can find any drill known to mankind on YouTube or on Twitter and follow and do this, and you try a lot of creative things and maybe some things that aren't necessarily worth trying, but certainly there's a lot out there compared to when you're growing up, or certainly when I was growing up. So how'd you come up with the things that you were doing and working on when you were working by yourself? Were you consciously thinking about that before you got to the court, or were you just kind of using your imagination as you're out there working on your game?
Yeah, I mean, I think back when I played, it was a lot of, you kind of, when I was younger, especially, you kind of just get there and wherever you feel like you kind of work on. Then when you get older, you're probably around more people that are more successful, and you learn how to, like, make your time more efficient. You learn about how, like, a good hour workout can be better than a not very, very good 3-hour workout. You know what I mean? Of, like, really getting after it when you're in there and being more organized in your approach, whether it's like set shots or coming off of pin downs or whatever it may be. Like, you're constantly working on things, but in a game speed manner. So I think once you figure that out, it's a big part of it.
Yeah, as you do get older in the game, you do have a better understanding of, okay, there's specific things that I got to work on to make myself a better player. I do think you become better organized in that way. It's funny because I always tell people that when I was a kid, I kind of had two workouts. I had a workout that I did when I was by myself, and then I had a workout when I could find somebody to rebound for me or that would shoot with me. And I always say I must have gotten really good at those drills because I think I did them for the entirety of my high school career and the entirety of my college career, and never really deviated very much from any of them. And so now I look at all the different things that I do with players as a coach and that I see players and other coaches doing. And I'm like, man, I wish I would have been either a little bit more creative, or I wish I would have had access to some of the resources that players have today in order to be able to get better. Because again, I got really good at the drills that I was working on, and
Right.
helped me become a better player. But I always wonder, man, what could I have done if I'd have just maybe varied it up or tried some different things here and there? And it's just, again, different era of the game for sure.
Right.
Tell me about your favorite memory as a high school player, growing up in a small town. Clearly, I'm sure that all your teammates, guys that you grew up with for your entire life, that you spent, you spent all your formative years in school playing with them. So what sticks out to you when you think about your favorite memory as a high school player?
Yeah, so I mean, it had to be. I mean, I grew up in a town of 500 people, like I said. But when I was a freshman in high school, we moved. We moved about an hour away to a
Okay.
school that was a 5A, which is the biggest in Missouri at the time. And the school I went to was honestly really bad, like at basketball. They had just been bumped up to the 5A level. They had won one game the year prior total, and they were like a country school that was playing in a big city league. Like the league we played in, we had to drive 2 hours for every conference game. Like every conference game was at least 2 hours away. Um, and then everyone said you really couldn't win there, you know. And my first year there, we won the district championship, and we advanced to state. And the second year, we did the same thing. So we did that back-to-back years, which still to this day hasn't been done again there. So I think that would probably be my favorite high school memory, from going from one win to winning back-to-back district titles.
As a young kid, watching your dad, playing with your dad, working on your game, becoming a high school player, was playing college basketball something that was on your radar from the time you were little? Was that a goal that came more into focus as you became a high school player? What was your mentality, your thought process when it came to potentially playing at the college level?
It was always a goal. It was something that I worked for, something I really wanted to do. At the same time, I didn't know how realistic it was, but it's something that I really wanted to do. And as I got older into it, you realize you're probably gonna have an opportunity to play in college. But again, I know that I'm probably not going to make the NBA more than likely. That one of those kind of deals, right? To where when the ball stops bouncing, I knew I wanted to coach. That's something I knew right away that give as much as I could into playing the game. But whenever that was over, then I knew I'd want to get into the coaching world.
When did that light bulb come on for you? How young were you when you knew you wanted to coach?
Man, I was pretty young, I would say. I mean, I'm probably middle school, for sure early high school. Like I knew I just loved basketball. I loved being around it. I love to compete, like just in anything. I like to compete, and that's a great avenue, as far as whenever you're not playing, you can, as a coach, you're just constantly competing. So I knew it's something I would really love to do. And it more so wasn't even a job for me. You know what I mean? Like I knew it was something I would love to do and bring passion to every single day. Um, so I could tell at a pretty early age. I didn't know how I was going to get there. And then like my path is not the way that most people's paths probably have been, so it's a very unique way, but I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Was there a coach early on in your life, whether it was in basketball or another sport, that really had a big influence on you wanting to coach? Was there somebody that when you're playing on their team, you're like, man, I love this guy and I'd love to be able to do what he does?
Yeah, I would say probably my high school coach, Dion Hargrove was his name. Playing for him was fantastic. And then more so too, because he cared about us more as people, not just as basketball players. I mean, extremely smart basketball coach. I mean, I think he's in the Missouri and Arkansas Hall of Fame, if I'm not mistaken. So extremely successful basketball coach, but just even better person, So like he's someone that I really enjoyed the way he approached it, because he really got to know us, and develop a relationship. Like I still talk to him to this day, which is a great thing. His son ended up actually being my first assistant when I got my first head job. So I think he had a big impact for sure.
When you think about what he was all about as a coach, and you mentioned one of the things, right, about caring about you as more than just a basketball player, but caring about you as a person. When you think about yourself as a coach and you think about the characteristics that he brought to your experience, what are some things that when you think about yourself, you kind of see a little bit of him that's carried over into your coaching style and your approach to the game?
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of similarities. Like I'm very, I would say, player oriented. I like to think I'm a player first coach. You know what I mean? Where I try to get to know our guys and build relationships with them. I'm not like a big cusser, a big yeller by any means. But at the same time, when we do things, we're going to do it the right way, or what I perceive to be the right way. You know what I mean? Like we're going to do things how we want them to be done. like I tell kids all the time, if you have a good attitude and you work hard and you're about the team, you're probably going to love playing for me. If you don't, you're probably not going to enjoy your time here. I mean, just very honest about that with them, and I think with that you get a lot of trust just because you're honest. That's one thing I think about me too, is that I'm very straightforward in what I want you to do and what I expect us to do as a team.
You always have that ability to tell the truth. I know sometimes as young coaches, right, it's difficult. You want to kind of keep everybody happy and you kind of can beat around the bush in those conversations. Was that something you were good at right off the bat, or is that something that you learned the hard way?
I was not good at it right off the bat. Like when I was young as an assistant, it's that, you go from playing to being an assistant, and that's awkward. Like you're going to hurt their feelings at times. It's just the way it is. You know what I mean? When you're being honest, which ultimately will help them in the long run. But that took a transition. Probably the first couple of years as a head coach, you get to where, after a while, you don't care as much. You know what I mean? As far as that goes, you're going to be very bluntly honest. Just the way I've always been. This is my personality in that aspect too. But early on, I would say I definitely struggled with that. And again, one of the coaches I worked for recently, I would say helped me in that area too, just watching the way he approached things. I worked for Billy Gillespie at Tarleton State. He's one where he's very direct. I think it's being around him, see how he approached things, helped me in that area too.
Yeah, sometimes you need to be able to visualize it, right? And see that, hey, I can give this player the honest truth. It may not be what they want to hear. And yet a week later, 2 weeks later, the relationship that you might have been worried about, hey, I'm damaging it, you start to realize that, hey, the relationship isn't damaged. And in all honesty, most good players, right, they want to be coached. They want somebody to tell them, hey, you got to improve in this, or hey, here's where you can make this better. And when you can do that, I think as a coach, players might not necessarily love hearing that in the moment, but upon reflection, and again, the best players, they want that coaching, they want that feedback because they crave getting better. And that's what I found in my coaching career. And I just think about it again, as a player, you want to figure out, hey, what can I do better? And if you have a coach that never corrects you or never tells you you're doing something incorrectly or there's a better way to do it, how do you ever grow and get better? And I think the best players clearly want to get better.
No, I completely agree. And one thing I tell our guys that all the time, that you're our guy. You know what I mean? And you're not just our guy when we're winning the big game and you had a big shot or whatever it may be, but you're still our guy when you make a mistake. You know what I mean? Well, that's something that we tell them all the time. Like we're still gonna be there. You're still our guy, even if you make us mad or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think it's a great, very simple way of reinforcing the confidence that you have in a player. And everybody makes mistakes. We were talking about basketball camp before we jumped on here. And it's one of my big things, talking about, hey, how can you be a great teammate? It's like everybody's going to make mistakes. And when your teammate makes a mistake, how do you react to that? Are you putting your head down? Are you throwing your arms up in the air? Are you, rolling your eyes? Or are you trying to pick that teammate up and right, maybe give them a constructive criticism or pick them up with some enthusiasm and get them back on the right track? And, it's all little things that go into building the culture of a program. And so much of that stems from what tone does the head coach set, right? And you can set the tone for how guys interact with each other, how staff interacts with players, and that communication piece and being honest is so, so important. And I do think, just like you mentioned for you, I know I was the same way when I was a young coach. Those conversations for me were really, really difficult. And it took me a long time to be able to understand, like, you got to tell them the truth, because if you beat around the bush and you give them half truths, eventually it all comes back to bite everybody. And then you end up having to have a lot more difficult conversation than the first one would have been. So definitely a good lesson to learn for young coaches out there without question. All right, going back to your playing days, tell me about the college decision, what the recruitment was like for you, and just, again, how you ultimately made your college choice.
Yeah. So I had to go the junior college route, something that I had to do academically. So I had a good amount of junior college offers. I ended up choosing to go to Fort Scott, which was a Division I JUCO at the time in the Jayhawk. Over now, looking back, multiple other top 25 caliber programs, but that school just worked really hard. Like their coaching staff, they was at all my games and they were just constantly there, and they worked really hard. So chose to go there. Had a good freshman year. I think averaged around 15 a game. Transferred to a school in Iowa, which is also a junior college. had a good career there at a school called NIAC. And then after that, I decided I wanted to get into coaching. One of the things probably cut my playing career a little shorter, than I could have. I mean, I led the Iowa League in scoring the year I played, but I got into coaching. So then I got into coaching and started that journey.
How hard was it to walk away? How much did you miss playing that first year when you're trying to get into the coaching profession? How much were you sitting on the sideline going, man, I kind of wish I was still playing? Or was that something that you were just kind of over and you're just like, hey, I'm ready to move on into the coaching world?
For those first couple of years, I think you're still a player trying to figure out how to be a coach. It's what it felt like for me, at least. You know what I mean? Like every day you're thinking when you're ready to play more than, I think your mindset's a little different, as a player than a coach. And it just takes a while to adapt for that. I know it took me a couple of years, especially when you're a younger coach. I mean, I think my first, you're 22, 23 years old, it's the players are about the same age as you, or they're a little bit younger. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it takes a little bit of time.
While you were playing, did you feel like you thought the game like a coach, where you were looking at the bigger picture and you were kind of trying to understand what all five guys on the floor are doing? You're trying to figure out what the greater strategy is? Or I always think back to my time as a player, and I'm going to be completely honest, like I never felt like I thought the game necessarily as a coach. I was trying to figure out, what do I need to do to be the best player I can be, to be able to help my team. And I wasn't necessarily analyzing the strategy that the coach was using, or why are we doing this defense or that. I was just like, okay, this is what he said we got to do. How do I execute it? I don't know which one of those camps better describes you as a player.
No, I would say it's very similar to that. Like whatever the coach said, I was 100% behind him. You know what I mean? And my whole focus was on myself, and then how we were going to win games. And I would hold, yourself accountable a lot of times for whatever is not being executed. You know what I mean? So I was never one to, as a player, to really even worry about that. You're just out there trying to play and trying to compete and trying to execute whatever the game plan is to the best way that you can to help your team. That was just my approach as a player.
Talk to me about the first steps into coaching. What do you do once you make that decision? Hey, I'm going to walk away from playing. What moves do you make in order to get the career started in the coaching profession? Yeah,
so I was fortunate. I ended up coaching my first 6 years at NIAC, where I played in college. So I coached there. It's actually where I met my wife. She was an all-conference point guard on the women's side there. And she's from that city, Mason City, Iowa. So, I spent 6 years at NIAC, which was fantastic for me. All those years were part-time. Some years you're making $2,000 up to, I think the most I made was $5,000 in a year. You know what I mean? So, you got to find side hustles, to try to get by. I was a poker dealer for the World Series of Poker. I also worked overnight at a mental health institution. I was also, and the thing about that too is I got thrown into, I was the head of our recruiting, at a young age, to where you learn how to recruit, how to build connections, that kind of thing. I was fortunate to have a head coach there, Mark Mole, who put a lot of trust into me, especially at a young age. And I made a lot of mistakes, but I think you learn from that. You learn your philosophies, what you like, what you don't like, what kind of players you like, what kind of players you don't like, all that kind of thing.
What do you think you were good at right away? What's something that you felt like you took to naturally as a coach? And then maybe conversely, what's an area that initially out of the gate you were like, ooh, this is maybe tougher than I thought, or this is an area where I really need to grow if I'm gonna become the kind of coach that I want to become?
Yeah, I would think I was pretty good at just like the details, as far as like at a practice setting, for an assistant, as far as helping the head coach echo what his message is. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, I don't know what to say, but I know I can kind of understand what he's trying to say and try to how to help him back it. You know what I mean? Like how to talk to the players on the side and how to try to get on guys about the way we're doing things as far as pace and that kind of thing. You know what I mean? Really just trying to make his life as easy as possible, just as an assistant. I feel like I was pretty good at that. An area to improve at for sure was right away was recruiting. Recruiting is one of those things where you got to build connections. You got to figure out what's your approach to talk to kids, just really the whole deal, like how just how you're going to approach it, what areas you want to try to recruit, who you're going to trust, who you're not going to trust, that whole thing. So that takes time.
How long did it take you to develop an eye for, obviously you're there for 6 years, so you're trying to recruit. There's a certain type of player, right? And a certain level of player that you can recruit that's gettable for you guys. So how long did it take you to get a feel for, hey, this is the level of the kid that we can go after, that we think we can get. This is the type of kid we want. How long did it take you to be able to walk into a gym and look at a group of players playing and identify, like, okay, this is a kid that can play at our level that's gettable for us?
I would say by year 2, for sure by year 3, I mean, I had a pretty good understanding. I mean, because also I've always been one to believe that you always want to try to recruit kids that are above your level, like everyone does. You know what I mean? But you also need to make them realistic. Like, can you actually get them? You know what I mean? But at the same time, you don't want to recruit kids that have offers below you that you can just kind of come in there and just get. You know what I mean? So that's kind of that fine line of, can you get them? Can you not get them? That kind of deal. But I think by year 2, for sure, year 3, I was there. I was fortunate enough. My second year, my first sign ever ended up being a 2-time All-American. So pretty fortunate in that aspect. They weren't all that way though, and there was plenty of busts along the way too. But by year 3, I had a pretty good understanding of the guys that my head coach wanted. I mean, because that's the big part of it too. You realize as an assistant, you might like them, but if they don't mesh with your head coach, it's probably not going to go very well. You know what I mean? So you need to figure out the kind of guys that he values.
Yeah, so true. As an assistant, thinking back to that time, now having been a head coach at multiple places,
Yep.
What do you think in your mind makes a good assistant coach? When you're hiring somebody to be your assistant, what are the key 2 or 3 characteristics that you think are most important for an assistant coach? So I'm thinking advice for somebody who's starting their career. Most of us start our careers as assistant coaches. What are some key attributes that you're looking for as a head coach in an assistant?
I mean, I would say number 1 is loyalty. I mean, that's something I think every head coach wants, is someone who's going to be loyal. Like, you don't got to agree with what I'm saying, but when we go out there, we got to make sure we're on the same page. You know what I mean? Like, behind closed doors, we can have conversations. That's fine. But when we're out there, like, we need to be on the same page of what the message is. So I think loyalty for sure is number 1. And then work habits, number 2, like your work ethic. Like, guys who work hard just seem to figure it out. You find a way, in my opinion. You're going to figure it out. You might not know a lot at the time or whatever it may be, but if you have that work habit and those desires, like, you're going to find a way to figure it out. So those are really the 2 main things that I look for, and just guys that, it kind of goes along with work habits, but guys that just love it. It's the same thing essentially. But guys who love to compete, love to be around it, it's not really a job for them. It's something that they're just passionate about.
Tell me about the next opportunity after you spend your 6 years as an assistant at North Iowa.
Yeah.
How do you?
So I mean, I was at NJCAA for 6 years. And then after a couple of years, I realized I wanted to be a head coach, like everyone does. And I'm trying to get head coaching jobs that I probably can't get. I think it's a funny story. I'm an assistant at NJCAA, and I call a school in the Jayhawk, which is a very dominant junior college conference, right? Division I junior college job. I finally get the AD on the phone. I'm talking to the AD. I'm giving my pitch, of why he should hire me. And he stops me mid through the conversation. He's like, "Son, you realize this is the Jayhawk head job you're calling about, right?" And that was like pretty eye-opening to me, because I'm a D2 JUCO assistant at the time. But okay, I might need to set my bar a little bit lower, because this might not be realistic, So I ended up getting a job in the same league we were in. It was actually a job that, I mean, essentially no one wanted, to be honest. The school's name was Little Priest Tribal College. They had an enrollment of 100 people. They had 3 full scholarships, and 51% of our roster had to be Native American. We were located on a Native American reservation. I got paid $6,000, total for the whole year for my first head coaching job. So it's a job that everyone said don't take. It'll ruin your career before it even gets going. They had won 1 game total in their first 3 years of the program. But I wanted to bet on myself, and I wanted to be a head coach. So I took that job. With that, obviously I'd have another job. So I worked overnight from 10 p.m. to like 10 a.m. So then we'd get off, try to get some sleep, and then go practice. We we didn't have a gym. Like, we didn't have a ball rack. We didn't have. I remember we had our practice jerseys would be at my apartment, wash them every night, that kind of deal. You know what I mean? But to me, that was my Duke. You know what I mean? Like, I was very excited for the opportunity. I'm forever grateful for them for giving me that opportunity. Was there for 1 year, and we actually had a good amount of success. So that's really where I got my first head coaching job, and then kind of springboarded to kind of where we're at now.
Coaches, you've got a game plan for your team, but do you have one for your money? That's where Wealth for Coaches comes in. Each week, we'll deliver simple, no-fluff financial tips made just for coaches. Whether you're getting paid for camps, training sessions, or a full season, Wealth for Coaches helps you track it, save it, and grow it. It's time to stop guessing and start building. Subscribe now at wealthforcoaches.beehive.com/subscribe and follow us on Twitter @wealthforcoaches for daily money wins. Your money needs a coach. Start with Wealth for Coaches. What was unique about coaching the Native American players and just coaching in that environment? What do you remember that made that experience unique? Obviously, there's not very many people that get that kind of opportunity and experience. So what do you remember about it?
Yeah, I had to learn a whole new culture. Just to be honest, like the Native American community was fantastic to me. It was great. But I mean, I didn't know, like, you learn the different tribes and how they play in different parts of the world, and you learn about res ball, which is essentially a very fast paced way of playing basketball. This is what is very common in their community. So just figuring out where you can try to get guys in different parts of the country that are Native American and that kind of thing. I went to the Native National Tournament in Phoenix, Arizona. Like, it was different. It was very eye opening for me. But it was fantastic. It really was. And I was very grateful for it.
What's one lesson that you took from that job on the basketball side that you still feel like is impacting you today from that first head coaching experience?
Man, I think the thing you take from that, hopefully you don't want to lose, is to be grateful. Because it's so easy when you go to places that have more things. Because when I was there, we didn't have a gym. We had to rent out a local high school. We could use it from 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock. We didn't have a weight room. We had to use a community rec center weight room. But we didn't have any of that stuff. We had 3 buildings total for the whole campus, and I just didn't care. I was just so excited to be a college head coach. I just didn't care. So that's something that I hopefully keep, as I go forward. Just to be thankful, and then it's a blessing to be a coach. That's something that hopefully I keep from that.
After that, you get an opportunity to go to Mississippi Gulf Coast, back as an assistant coach. Was it hard to go back from being the decision maker as the head coach to being an assistant coach? Obviously, it's an opportunity. As you said, you weren't banking a huge payroll there. Right. coaching for $6,000. So just tell me about the opportunity at Mississippi Gulf Coast and why it was the right move at the right time for you then.
Yeah. So the previous assistant there was one of my best friends. He was the best man at my wedding, so I knew him very well, and he moved on. So it just happened to be the situation where I knew that staff really well. I knew the head coach really well. Wendell Weathers is a Hall of Famer. It was a full-time position, to be honest. This is the first time I've ever had a full-time position, and Coach Weathers had been there for, probably about 30 years. He was very honest with me about how he was going to do it for a couple more years, then he was going to look to retire. That was kind of his thought process. So I thought, what better situation to go and learn from someone who's in the Hall of Fame in a great spot like that, and also a full-time position, and hopefully get the job whenever he decides to hang it up.
What'd you do with all your money, man?
Oh, yeah, no. I feel like you lose it all on the move, that's for sure.
It's funny because people who are outside of the coaching profession, I feel like coaching and teaching are two professions that people who are not in those two professions honestly have such a misperception of what the real story of coaching is and what the real story of teaching is. And in coaching, I think the biggest misnomer, right, is everybody watches Division I college basketball on Saturdays and thinks that, hey, you just walk right in and boom, all of a sudden you're on TV and you're coaching in Florida, or you're coaching at North Carolina, or you're coaching at Ohio State, or whatever it is, and the number of people who are coaching college basketball who have experiences, Kyle, similar to yours, of spending a bunch of years as a part-time assistant, making next to no money, and they just keep doing it because they're so passionate about what it is that they get to do. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, that I've tried to share through the podcast, is just, if you're a young coach and you're getting into the profession, there's some things that you have to be willing to accept. One of them is you're probably not going to make a lot of money in the early part of your career. And number two, you got to be willing to go where the next job opportunity is. And if you're willing to do those two things, and I'll take it back to something that you said a few minutes ago, if you're willing to work hard, then usually eventually good things are going to happen for you, because you've put your time in and you've done the things that you're supposed to do. And yeah, it's a slow start in terms of monetary reward, but when you're getting to do what you're passionate about and you work hard at it, eventually you're going to get better opportunities to come along if you're doing what you're supposed to do where you're at. And it sounds like your career is a pretty good example of that.
No, I completely agree. I appreciate that. I've always been one too, to where you just put your head down and work. You know, no matter what, if you're having a good day, bad day, whatever it is, you just focus on the work. You know, I've always believed if you put in the time, you put in the work, I think good things will happen. And that's what, I've always tried to do that.
So after your 2 years at Mississippi Gulf Coast, you get an opportunity to get another head coaching job at Western Texas. Tell me a little bit about how that opportunity comes across your desk and why you felt it was a good move for you at that time in your career.
Yeah. So that's honestly a pretty crazy situation. So I moved from Nebraska, Little Priest, to Mississippi Gulf Coast. I was there for one season, and we had a great season. I think the best season they had in 7 or 8 years. We won 20 games, which in Mississippi at the time you only could play 23, and during the regular season. So we had a really successful year. I learned so much from Coach Weathers. Like, I still talk to him pretty consistently. He was a mentor of mine, coaching wise. And after the year, he decides he wants to retire. And I was told I was going to get the job. I thought I was going to get the job. And that's the first time I kind of got introduced into what the politics of the business could be. Because the person that ended up getting the job, he was I feel like every SEC head coach that was possible was calling. You know what I mean? Like, trying to help that person get the job. And I didn't have those kind of ties. Just, you know what I mean? I didn't have that kind of juice. So I ended up not getting that job, which was pretty devastating. So then this is like July, like late July. So I just got to find a job, and end up, luckily enough, going to Western Texas as an assistant for Andre Owens. God works in mysterious ways. Like, so I'm at Western Texas for 3 weeks. And Coach Owens gets a job opportunity at Sam Houston State to be an assistant there. And then I'm right back in the same situation. You know what I mean? And then you're like, did I just move here to not get the job? You know what I mean?
Right.
And the AD there, Tammy Davis, forever grateful for her. She just gave it to me. Like, everyone was calling it's a whack jag job, obviously Division I JUCO, in the same league that I'm in now, one of the premier junior college leagues in the country. And she had been around me for about 3 weeks, and she didn't even open it up. We met, and she gave me the job, and that's kind of how I got fortunate enough to get that opportunity at Western Texas.
What do you love about JUCO basketball? Obviously, you had an opportunity to play at the JUCO level. You've coached at multiple institutions at multiple levels of junior college. What makes it unique, and what do you particularly enjoy about coaching at that level?
Yeah, I think it's a very rewarding level, because you get them usually fresh out of high school, or that are 1 year removed, and help them reach, their goals. Like this, a lot of them want to play Division I basketball or Division II, whatever it may be. But you get to be around them and help them reach that, when sometimes they've been told they were not good enough for that level, or whatever it may be in that situation. You know what I mean? But that's extremely rewarding. And I really like helping that. I like helping those kids get on the right path. hopefully getting some opportunities that they didn't have previously. So many times kids just need exposure. That's what it is. A lot of the time they just need to be in a situation where they're going to be seen, and I think it's very rewarding, level in those areas. So I love coaching junior college. It's one thing that I really do.
What's the biggest challenge that you find in trying to balance the individual players' goals, which, as you mentioned, a lot of guys that go to JUCO, right? They want to get an opportunity to become a scholarship player at the Division I or the Division II level. And yet you're also still tasked with putting together a winning team and building the camaraderie and all that stuff. And as a JUCO, you've got the 2-year window with guys, right. And obviously now with the portal and everything else and whatever, that there's a lot of guys coming in and out for a year. So how do you balance the individual goals of a player in terms of their aspirations playing at the next level with trying to build a cohesive team and camaraderie? How do you go about doing that? What are some things that you feel are critical in order to make those two things happen simultaneously?
Yeah, that one is probably the hardest part of being a junior college coach, to be honest with you. It's one of the things I've had a lot of learning experiences is with it, I think the main thing you try to sell your guys on that if we're winning games, you're going to move on. That's a big thing that we've had here. Like we've had, I think, 17 Division I players in 3 years, and every player who's averaged 5 points a game is signed Division I. That's something we tell them too. Like, hey, if we're winning, like you're going to move on. That's something we really preach to them. At the same time, I think it really goes back to who you recruit. I really do. Like if you're recruiting guys that are about the right things and about winning, I think it makes it a lot easier, compared to where if you're recruiting guys that probably care more about what they scored compared to if your team won or lost. That's going to be hard. It just is. Like you put all those guys on the same team, it's going to be very hard for you to be successful and for them to really buy into what you're saying. So I think a big part of that is recruiting winners, and I'm a guy to where it's really hard to change somebody's habits. And for those coaches that can do it, that's fantastic. It's hard. I've struggled with that. You take a kid and you're like, well, he didn't guard for them, but he'll guard for me. It hasn't worked great, So, again, props to those coaches who can do that, but I really try to find guys that fit kind of what we are about and if they're about winning. And when they're about that, it makes it a lot easier for them to buy into, if we have success, you will have opportunities.
What are some things beyond that winning pedigree that are intangibles that you look for? Obviously, there's a certain level of basketball skill and ability that a player has to be able to have to play at your level. But what are some things that you're looking for when you talk about finding a guy that's going to fit into your culture, that's going to buy into that team first mentality? What are some of the things that are intangibles that you look for in a player when you're recruiting them?
Yeah, so for one is body language. Like I really like to watch a kid's body language. Like I'll tell recruits, I try to find a game throughout the year where you got beat and you got beat badly. Like I try to find that game if I can to watch it because I want to see how you respond when adversity hits. You know what I mean? Like, are you picking your teammates up the floor or are you just walking past them? You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. I think you can see a lot about a person's true character when they're faced with adversity. So that's a big thing is their body language. And for me personally, it's multiple effort plays, whether like on the defensive side, like you're getting rebounds out of your area, things of that sort. Offensively, you're moving, you're not just standing. Like those kind of things are things that I particularly look for. And like, do they make the extra pass? Does the ball move? Obviously, you got to be good enough. Like that's number one. But after that, as far as intangibles, those are the intangibles I really try to focus on.
How do you put together your initial list of guys that you're going to be able to recruit? Is that being done through your contacts throughout the basketball world? Do you use any scouting services? Are you using your own two eyes to go out and see guys? How do you put together your initial list of players that you want to consider, obviously, before you start whittling it down?
Yeah. So, we have pretty big lists, and kind of the way I've got to where we do it now is we have different avenues. Obviously, the portal is one that everyone has access to as far as Division I's and Division II's. Also, there's a junior college where you can look on junior college portal to see who's been released, who hasn't been released from junior colleges. And then another one that we use is I use Prep Hoops. Like I one of those where I subscribe to Prep Hoops for all the states, so I can see the rankings for every state. And just go break them down, like see who hasn't signed, who has signed. And I'm not one to go purely off of rankings. It's just a starting point. It's really all it is. You know what I mean? You get names and you see if you like them and who they're recruited by and that kind of thing. And if you're doing those two things, you're gonna have a lot of names to begin with. And then you get into where you're going with people call you about kids and that kind of thing. But that's kind of how we've approached it. So that way you have a big list of high school kids and they can come from anywhere in the country, and they can be from anywhere. You have a big list of junior college transfers, hopefully, that fit. And then you also have the portal, which has the Division I and the Division II kids in it too.
In a given recruiting year, how many guys do you end up getting to the point where serious is maybe the wrong word, but when you start getting, how many guys do you get close with, whether they end up signing with you or not from that big list? How many guys do you get down to the point where you're actively recruiting them, you want them to be there, they're engaged with you, maybe they sign, maybe they don't, but how many guys do you get to that point with in a given year?
Man, I would say it's quite a few. I mean, if a pure ballpark guess is probably 50. You know, I would say probably somewhere in that area, and you're looking to sign a team of 15. It might be more than 50, to be honest with you, because a lot of times, we miss. You know, and we'll tell kids too, because we're trying to recruit kids again that are hopefully above our level. You know what I mean? So like, there's like a couple of years ago, I lost like 5 kids in July because Division I just came and took them. You know, because you can't really stop that nowadays. You know, so there's a lot of times where we'll miss on kids. You know, but again, you want those kind of kids. You got to find a way to get those kind of kids. So I'd probably say 50, if not more. You know, but it's just constantly going.
What's something that you took from Western Texas, that experience? Same question that I asked you before about Little Priest. What's something that you took from your experience as a head coach at Western Texas that has continued to impact you now at Howard?
At Western, you know, I would just say at Western, I think Western was really good for confidence, to be honest. I think Western, because that's the first job where I had where you want to say big boy junior college basketball. You know what I mean? As far as it's a Division I JUCO, I mean, you're dealing with South Plains and Odessa and Howard and Midland and all those kind of teams, New Mexico, on a nightly basis. So whenever you're able to have success there, you know, we had a really good 2 years. We actually won the region or the conference tournament my second year, which hadn't been done in 40 plus years. When you're able to have success there, I think that builds a lot of confidence, you know, like, hey, what we're doing does work and we can have success at this level. Because before that, you don't know. I mean, you don't know. You think it's going to work, but until you actually do it, you're not sure that it's going to work. So I would say that just the confidence piece was a big part.
What was something that worked there that after you left, you had confidence, hey, this is going to work for me moving forward? What's something that you tried there that you had in your mind that you've been thinking about? You're like, hey, I want to see if we can get this done. Or was it just the fact that you were doing some of the same things that you had done previously, but you were just doing them at a higher level?
No, we kind of had to change that Western teams. I mean, I inherited a lot of it the first year. So I'm really just from a strategy standpoint of how we approached the defensive side was a big part. You know, we switched a lot. We switched on those Western teams. We were switching 1 through 5. We were doubling from the baseline. We were doing a lot of things that we hadn't done in the past, but it made sense for that team because we were all so interchangeable, and we didn't have what would be like a true 5. You know, so we kind of had to adapt. And that's something I would say that that we had a lot of success with, and I've kind of carried on. We've tweaked it since then. You know, every team is different, but that's something I would say for that.
You mentioned earlier the opportunity to work under Billy Gillespie at Tarleton. Had you had a previous relationship with Gillespie or someone on staff, or how does that opportunity come to you?
Yeah, so I mean, extremely fortunate. So when I was at Western Texas, my first year, you know, the year that we got the job at Western, Coach Gillespie was at Ranger, and they're in our same region. So we made the region tournament, which only 4 teams do per side, which is really hard to do out here. And we drew Ranger in the first round, and they were number 3 in the country. And we beat Ranger in the region tournament. And I think that kind of gained some respect from Coach Gillespie, and we kind of started a friendship, you know, from that. Then the following year he gets Tarleton State, and I have a relationship with him, and he calls me and asks if I'd like to do that. And that's really where it came from, because I didn't really know Coach prior to that. I mean, I knew who he was. Obviously Kentucky and A&M and Texas Tech. I mean, I knew who he was, but we didn't have a relationship really prior to that.
So you get in there, and clearly going back from, again, being a head coach to being an assistant.
Yep.
You're jumping up to the NCAA Division I level. What were some of the differences in terms of being an assistant at the Division I level, where you have a much bigger staff than your previous experiences as an assistant, where you were part of a much smaller staff, where in many cases you're part-time? What was it like being an assistant with a bigger staff at the Division I level?
Man, it was night and day. Like, it was just a totally different ball game, because I mean, you're talking about, you got 3 full-time assistants, you got ops, you got development people, you got GAs, and you got people on campus that are in charge of your academics. Like, as a junior college coach, you do all that. Well, you know what I mean? Like, you're in charge, which is the great part about being a junior college coach, is you learn how to do that. You learn how to do all those different areas, But at the Division I level, like, I think I had to monitor 2 kids academically. We were all broken up. I think I had 2 kids that I had to monitor academically. You're able to focus on 1 scout per every 3 games, So it's a whole different deal, just from a resource standpoint, and kind of what's expected of you, compared to, again, like junior college. It's probably you as a head coach or assistant with one other person. That's really what it's a 2-person staff. And you're doing all of it. You're doing all the getting the FAFSAs ready, the dorms, all the paperwork, all that kind of stuff, compared to where at that level, you might not have to do every class check. You might not have to make sure they're on top of their academics for the whole team, that kind of thing. So it's very different.
How thankful are you that when you broke into the coaching ranks, that you broke into an environment where you did have to do everything, kind of have your hand in all aspects of the program, and were able to learn that stuff, and then consequently you've been able to apply that over the totality of your career? I know I've talked to different guys that have started at different levels, right? And some guys start at the Division I level, and maybe they're a GA, or maybe they're lucky enough to get an ops job because they have a connection to somebody. And you start out and you're much more, again, you have all those resources, you have those other coaches that you can bounce ideas off of, and you're all that piece of it. But when you're starting at a lower level, oftentimes you get that wide ranging experience of you're booking hotels on the road, you're coaching on the floor, you're doing recruiting, you're learning a little bit about the academic side of it, you're in financial aid. There's just so many different pieces of a program that you get to touch as an assistant at a lower level compared to the Division I. So how thankful are you that you were able to break in at a level where, not that you wouldn't have liked to have been getting paid, but you get what I'm saying. The experience that you were able to gain from having your hand in so many things as a young coach.
Yeah, I think it's the best thing that could happen for me particularly, but just in general, if I had to recommend, that's what I'd recommend. I think you learn so much. Like, you learn how to work on the floor, how to make sure kids are taking care of their academics, make sure they're getting all their paperwork in, which is a lot of stuff right there. Then you learn how to recruit, and then also your voice is going to be heard, which is a big part of it too. You get on those staffs where there's 3 to 6, 7 people, whatever it may be, those bigger staffs. It's a lot of voices, going on. When you're on a staff of 2 people, I mean, it's you and them. You know what I mean? Like, you guys got to figure it out. So, but I think it's really, really good just for overall growth. I mean, you learn about all areas. I mean, whether it's about getting an international kid in or whatever it may be, stuff that you're not going to deal with more than likely at the higher levels, or the bigger staffs. So, I mean, I think it can be very beneficial.
What was it about the opportunity at Howard that made you decide to jump back into the junior college level as a head coach? I know you mentioned a couple times just that the level that you're coaching at now at Howard, and how you're at the top of the JUCO ranks. But what was it about that particular job that made you decide, hey, I'm going to jump back into the JUCO and become a head coach there at Howard?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was very familiar with it for one. I mean, because it was 45 minutes away from Western Texas where I previously coached. Scott Rains, who was here before me, did a fantastic job and was a friend. And then before him, obviously Mark Adams, who was head coach at Texas Tech a couple of years ago. So there's a really big, I think, tradition along with Howard. So I mean, I knew it was a great spot. And for me personally, the reason I did it, I love coaching Division I. I love working for Coach Gillespie. He's a really good friend to this day. We talk probably weekly. My wife was pregnant with our first kid when we were at Western Texas, and which that's kind of a crazy story there too. And then when we were at Tarleton, she got pregnant for our second child. So I really wanted to make sure I was present. That was a big part of it for me, is I wanted to make sure I could kind of see my kids grow up. The Division I life, especially where we were at Tarleton in the WAC. I mean, I think we were playing. I think it was Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday. So when you go on road trips, you're gone. Like you're gone for a full week, and then you're gone for all the summer. It's just what the job is. I mean, you're constantly gone. So a big part of it for me was I wanted to be a head coach again, purely so I could make sure I could be around my family, as they grew up. So that was a big allure for me about the Howard job, and also just the tradition associated with it. I mean, I knew the people here; they've had so much success over the years. It's a job that I really just can't say no to.
When you first get the job and you come in the door, what do you think about in terms of being the most important 1, 2, 3 things that you felt like you had to establish right out of the gate to get the program to live up to the vision that you had for it as you're taking the job?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the first thing is you got to get players. I mean, that's just the reality. You got to find a way to recruit and get players. But for me, like when I got the job, I wanted to make sure I, introduce myself to everyone, obviously here on campus and the community, and kind of let them know what I was about. Just kind of person I was, and the kind of program that we wanted to have. And then it comes down to trying to find the players that fit how you do things, in the program you want to have. Because I mean, that first year I took it over, we didn't have a single returner. There's a couple kids that we wanted to come back that were very successful, and I get it. I mean, there was a coaching change, and they had offers to go elsewhere, and they chose to do that. So we had to replace it. We had to replace a full team. So I mean, that's really what right away you're trying to get settled. To move, to get settled, to build a whole new team, also to get to know everyone on campus, let them know what you're about, be active in the community, kind of just set your values.
How difficult is it to establish your culture when you have no returning guys to be able to enforce that culture from player to player? Obviously, we all hear, hey, a player-led team is better than a coach-led team. But in your case, the players really have nowhere to lead when they don't really know what the coach wants. So how did you go about in that first year? How did you establish the culture with 15 new guys on the roster and nobody that you could go to say, hey, we got to get the guys doing this, or hey, what's the feel for the locker room, and what can we do? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so that's challenging. To be honest, again, it's one of the hardest things to do. I think one of the things that I have a big sign on my board, every day, as far as no slippage. That's the hardest thing I think as a head coach to do, is to be on every day, because you got to bring the energy, you got to bring the juice, and you can't have bad days as a head coach. You have to hold the standard is the standard. And when you start in October and you finish in March, it's a long season. And to constantly, that's something I constantly got to get better at. As far as when you constantly have that bar, you got to make sure you set it. So I would say that's a big piece of it. Just saying the standard's a standard. But when we meet our guys to start the year, like I tell them all, this is my team. Like this is 100% my team right now. As the year goes on, you're going to understand what I want. It's going to be 70% my team, 50% my team. By the end of this thing, we get into conference play. This is your team. Like you should understand them, what our values are, what we want to do, that kind of thing. So then it is your team. You need to have ownership of it. Again, like you said, player-led teams are going to go farther than coach-led teams. So at that point, I think you guys will determine the kind of season we're going to have. But right now, I'll tell them this is my team. But at that point, it's going to be your team.
How do you develop leaders? Do you look for guys that sort of stand out in the process of you're going through, your workouts in the fall, you're going through practice, you're starting to see leaders emerge?
Yeah.
Or is it more organic where you're trying to, how are you organically trying to develop leaders? What's the process for doing that?
I think you really find out a true leader when adversity hits. That's where I like when they're going as a hard day for practice, like how are they responding? How, you can see like are they helping others? Are they pushing through? It's something I tell our guys all the time too. It's really easy to be a leader when you're the one telling someone what to do, right? Like I think you find out who a true leader is also is when they can tell someone what to do. Then when they tell them back, they're receptive to it. They don't get defensive. You know what I mean? So I think that's how you find the mark of what a true leader is. And guys will follow those kind of guys. You don't have to be the most vocal guy. You can lead by example. But if guys see you working hard and taking criticism and that kind of thing too, I think those are the kind of guys you want to be leaders. And we try to develop that by putting our guys in situations where you got to go through adversity. Like you're going to be where you got to go through adversity, and also just individual meetings, like talking to guys, showing them on film of body language, that kind of things, areas they got to improve on. I think that can help develop leadership as well.
How do you keep guys competitive in a practice environment? Again, we talked about it earlier in terms of they have individual goals. You still have team goals. You talked about, hey, if we win, sort of the rising tide lifts all boats sort of theory. If we win, you're going to get the kind of recognition that you need. But how do you keep the competition level high in practice and then have two guys that are competing against each other? One guy, whatever, gains the advantage, is playing more minutes than another guy. How do you make sure that guy 12, who was beat out by guy 5, how do you make sure guy 12 is still completely bought into what you're trying to do and is a good presence on the bench? And I know that's something that sometimes coaches struggle with, right? Because ultimately the currency of basketball to players is minutes and playing time. So how do you handle a guy who's competing every day, day in, day out? You're getting guys to get after each other. And then how do you get them back for game night to make sure that everybody's on the same page, rowing that boat the same direction?
Yeah, and that can be challenging, whenever someone's playing a lot and someone else isn't. But I think a big part of that, something I struggled with earlier in my career, is I think that goes to who you recruit. Like I think that is a big part of it, is finding character guys who understand what it's like to compete, but at the end of the day are all about the team. I think that really is, because again, it's hard to change people. But I think that's a big part. If you recruit someone who values winning, who's a high character kind of guy, they're going to understand it. They're probably going to understand too. We stat our practices. So again, they come in my office. Like, if you tell them, if you walk through the door, we'll have a conversation. And I'll be very honest with you, and I'll show you right on film of why so-and-so is playing more, whatever it may be. So we stat everything. And we can show them that. But I think that's really what it comes down to as far as who you recruit, about having guys that will compete, that have high character. But that's always going to be a tricky situation. And some years it goes better than others.
How do you organize practices on a daily basis? Do you like to have the same flow and formula to practice where you're starting with whatever shooting, and then you go to offense and you go to defense?
Yeah.
Do you mix it up day to day? Just what's your philosophy on building a practice?
Man, I would do the same stuff every day if I could, to be honest with you. But the players don't want to do the same stuff every day. So what I do is I kind of get a list of anywhere from 3 to 6 or 7 drills that accomplish the same thing that we're going to do and just rotate them, But in practice, we try to make it as competitive as possible. We want there to be a winner and a loser for every drill. And then when there's a loser, there's going to be a consequence, like whatever it may be. For us, we have a big sign. We have a 4,000 seat arena, and we have a big sign up top of it, and the loser's got to go touch it. And they hate that. Like they hate to be the ones who lost and have to go drive go up all those stairs and touch that sign. They absolutely hate it. So that's one thing that that we do. I would say is just trying to instill that.
During practice, how do you mix and match lineups when you're going 5-on-5? In other words, do you like to always have your 5 starters playing against your second unit? Do you mix up the 5 starters with guys in the second unit? How do you balance that out day to day in practice? And then how do you let guys know sort of where they're at in terms of how they're going to where they're going to be placed in practice? Does it matter?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm with the starters today or whatever. I know that there's a lot of different ways that players think about that kind of thing, but how do you think about that as a coach?
Yeah. So I missed the second part of your question last time. So practice wise, usually we'll go the first 60 minutes is very drill oriented. I try to mix up and be very competitive. Then the last anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour usually is we're going to try to play in some sort of way, so that's what a pretty standard practice for us looks like. Again, for me, I would do drills. I love drills. I love, in particularly defense. If we could do it for 2 hours, I'd do it for 2 hours, but they don't want to do it for 2 hours, so that's a pretty standard day. Again, everything we do is going to be very competitive. There's going to be a winner and a loser. And as far as teams go, I like to mix teams up every couple of drills. And because we stat practices, and the main stat for us is winning percentage, and we'll put it up there every week of who won the week. So when you mix up the teams constantly, you're able to find out. Some guys just find a way to win. You might, if you watch a practice and you're like, well, he doesn't score much, he doesn't do this much, but boy, he wins about 70% of the time. You know what I mean? And then you start looking at, well, why is he always winning? So we're constantly trying to. I like to change the groups a lot, and then I'll know who our starters are too, and I'll make sure they get a good amount of reps. They might get a game or two more as you get into it, like into the conference play, the kind of thing where they're together more. Where it's that top 7 or 8 rotating in. But I also like to see, talk about developing leaders. I like to put our best, or maybe our best one or our best 2 on a team that maybe don't have our best players on there. And see if they can find a way to win. So I like mixing them up quite a bit.
Do you stat practice live or do you stat it off the film?
Oh, we got to go off the film. Yeah, we don't have the staff to honestly to stat it live, so we go back and we'll stat it off the film. And we stat a lot of different areas. But again, it comes down to, like I tell them, the most important one for me is the winning percentage, which also makes those guys want to compete.
What's something that you look for in your team, whether it's in practice or whether it's in games, from an analytics stat standpoint? What 4 factors? What's something that you feel like is important that you track that really drives winning and losing for your team?
Yeah, I think for us, if you're to hold a team below 40% from the floor, below 30 from the 3-point line, and you win the boards and you turn the ball over, our goal is less than 11. But if you can do those 4 things, you're going to win. Like, you're going to win at, I think, a very high percentage. If you can do those things. So again, it's really built for us on defense, winning the boards, and value in the basketball. All the other stuff is great, but if you want to make like a simple version of it, that's just the simplest thing. I can tell our guys, if you're just winning the paint, because the boards are the paint, if you're winning the paint, you're probably going to win the game. Because that means you're
How much film do you use with your individual guys? So obviously you're watching a lot of film, you're watching practice, you're watching games, you're watching opponents. How much of the film do you share with the team collectively as a whole, where everybody's watching together? And then do you do any individual meetings where you're meeting with one guy and just kind of going over a couple of clips? How do you handle the film side of it?
Yeah, so we're probably a little more old school compared to some of the, I would say, the Division Ones and stuff nowadays that watch a lot of clips. At the beginning of the year, we start off in small groups, and I'll have like groups of 2 or 3 in my office, and we're watching the film of what you got to do better. And then it turns into when the year is going, everyone's going to be together, and we watch every game for the most part from front to back. Like and those can take a while. We're very honest about them. And then we also really dive into our opponents, which will be a lot of clips probably the following day. But we spend a lot of time in the film room compared to what I think a lot of schools now do. But, you'll do your clips every day compared to they might not sit down and watch a full game. But we still do that.
What do you like about watching the full game? What do you feel like you get out of it beyond? And I think when you watch clips sometimes, right, they're isolated. And I'm guessing that for you being able to see the whole picture of, okay, I can see a trend, or we can see a trend by watching the whole game of here's something we're doing well repeatedly versus here's something maybe we're struggling with repeatedly. Is that kind of what you're looking for in terms of a whole game, is looking for those trends?
Yeah, I would say that. And then also when you're watching the whole game, I think honesty is a big part of it. I mean, because when you're clipping it up, you can clip what you want to clip, and you can avoid certain things if you want to avoid them. Like if you're not looking for a spot that could be confrontational, you can avoid it. Like when you're watching a game with the team, like it's going to come up and you're going to have to address it. I think that's one of the things about when you're watching a full game is you got to be willing to address those situations, that could be kind of awkward. You know what I mean? Again, it goes back to telling them the truth and coaching them. Like I think when you watch the full game, they'll understand too of what you want, very well to a T.
Let's shift to in-game coaching. What's the hardest part of coaching in a game? What's the aspect of decision-making within a game that is the most challenging?
Yeah, I would say in a game, as a head coach, it can be challenging managing if you're doing like the subs and also trying to figure out what they're doing scheme-wise. And then for us, we've always been a very set-oriented team, so we run a lot of sets. So I'm trying to figure out what will work against them, so I'm trying to like I'll tell my assistants what we're looking to do for the next 3 sets. Like I'm constantly like, name and say this, I think this will work, write it down, So I'm trying to think of sets that'll work. I'm trying to watch like how they're attacking our defense. If we're having problems, it's where it can be really challenging, because they're giving us problems with whatever their actions may be. And then also controlling the subs, like how do we keep a constant flow of subs? It's something I got to get better at, if in my career, early in my career, we're one of those where we would play 7 or 8 guys, we kind of had to by our scholarship situation where we were at. And you get now where it's like we have more bodies and we can play more people. So you want to try to keep fresh guys out there. So that can be very challenging to manage in a game, I would say.
Do you sub more by feel, or do you kind of plan out like, hey, at the 16-minute mark, give or take, I'm going to try to get guy X in there? How do you approach the substitution patterns?
I try to have an idea in my mind before the game goes of the initial ones. Now if they're playing better or whatever, then they might stretch it. But I try to give everyone just a run that I want to early, and kind of see what they're doing. And then after that, then you kind of just play by how I do it. You kind of just play by who's playing well and who's locked into the game plan and that kind of thing. But you try to get everyone in relatively early, if in the first probably 10 or so minutes, you get a couple of minutes in and kind of see what the flow of the game is and how they're doing. That's kind of always been my approach, So once you get to the second half, even from a player standpoint, I think it's really hard to put someone in the second half that hasn't played yet. You can do it, but it can also, at some point, it becomes unfair to them too, So I try to avoid that if possible, but that's how we try to do the subbing.
All right, silly question. You have a game day superstition?
I wouldn't say game day, but I got a funny one. So when I was at Little Priest Tribal College, we played a team that was they're in our conference. They were the defending national champs. They were really good. I mean, they were really good. I think they were 36-1 the year prior, won the national title, and beat multiple Division I JUCO national powers. The time we played them, they were 13-0, and they had beat us a couple weeks earlier by like 20. And I used to always wear a suit, and I was walking out, and my wife says, you're wearing all black. I didn't know I was wearing all black. She goes, you're wearing all black. And I go, it doesn't matter. I'm going to a funeral anyways. So walk out the door, and we actually end up pulling an upset at Little Priest. We beat the number 1 team in the country that hadn't lost in essentially 2 years. So after that, superstitious-wise, when I had a big game, I'd wear the all-black suit.
There you go. I like it. And based in some reality. There's some reality there. You're not just pulling stuff out of thin air. There's a track record there of winning. I like it. It's always funny to hear what guys say to that question, just in terms of, people that have interesting little game day things that they do that they believe in. What about just your game day routine? Take it away from superstitious, just on game day. What do you like to do? What helps you to get in the best frame of mind to prepare for a game so you can be at your best for your team?
I like to kind of get away if possible. And I like to try to not not be in the office a lot on game day. I'll go to my house and I'll have our scout essentially just on a replay. That's kind of my game day routine, is just sitting there and watching the scout over and over and over again. And then as it gets closer to game time, I'll probably take that off and put on like a movie and just kind of like just relax myself. But that's pretty standard. I mean, it's nothing crazy by any means, but that's a pretty standard game day for me, is really try to focus in on our opponent. And then after that, probably put on a movie to try to relax.
How do you incorporate your family, your wife and your daughters into your program? What do you do to keep them around your team, to sort of share time with you while you're with your basketball family, but you're also with your family at home? How do you balance that out? How do you try to bring the two together?
Yeah, so first of all, my wife is an absolute rock star. She's amazing. Obviously, we've kind of been all over the country, and she was as supportive as could be, for every single stop. But as far as having the family, like anytime we're doing team activities, I try to have my family there. I just want them to be there, and I want to spend time with them. But I also like for them to be around my players so they can also see that I'm a father. How I care for my kids. That's something that's important to me. Like I said, like when I leave practice every day, when I go home, the phone will be off. For those 3 hours, I won't be really reachable. And then after that, I'll get back to it. But that's an important aspect.
All right. 2-part question to wrap things up.
Yep.
Part 1, when you think ahead to the next year or two, what do you see as being your biggest challenge? And then the second part of the question, when you think about what you get to do every day, especially considering your journey and the different stops you've had along the way and the dues you've paid, what brings you the most joy about getting up every day and getting to be the head coach at Howard College? So your biggest challenge and then your biggest joy.
Yeah, I mean, I would say biggest challenge, obviously where you're at is competing in this league. I mean, this league is extremely challenging. But just from a coaching perspective, I think it's always going to be is not having any slippage, and just every day just trying to make sure the guys are getting better, and that everything's your responsibility as the head coach. You take ownership for all of it. So I mean, that's I would say the biggest challenge is every day is going forward that way. Biggest joy, I mean, I would say I love where I'm at. I love coaching. Just very blessed. So I think just coaching in general is a joy. Obviously winning and competing and that kind of thing as well.
That's a really good answer. And I think it speaks to what coaching is all about, right? Those of us that have a passion for the game of basketball. And I always say that this podcast is one small way for me to give back to the game of basketball. I can never possibly repay the game for what it's given me. And in some small way, this is my little token of giving back to the game. And clearly, again, from talking to you and listening to what you had to say, just the passion that you have for coaching and for the JUCO level, I think comes through loud and clear. And the ability to make that impact on the guys that you're coaching every day and do it through the game of basketball, it's something that I don't take for granted. I know you don't take for granted either. The ability to be able to do that day in and day out is special. And before we wrap up, I want to give you a chance to share, how can people reach out to you, find out more about your program? So share email, social media, website, whatever you feel comfortable with. And after you do that, I'll jump back in and wrap things up.
Yeah. So I mean, if I'm pretty active on Twitter. I would say I think it's Coach Cooper _ I believe is Twitter. Also, any email is kcooper@howardcollege.edu. It's also on our website. If you get a hold of me on either one of those, I'll make sure to respond. But I love to talk. I love to talk basketball. I love to talk hoops. Feel free to reach out anytime.
Kyle, cannot thank you enough for taking the time out of your schedule tonight to join us. Really appreciate it. And to everyone out there, thanks for listening. And we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.
Your first impression is everything when applying for a new coaching job. A professional coaching portfolio is the tool that highlights your coaching achievements and philosophies, and most of all, helps separate you and your abilities from the other applicants. The Coaching Portfolio Guide is an instructional, membership-based website that helps you develop a personalized portfolio. Each section of the Portfolio Guide provides detailed instructions on how to organize your portfolio in a professional manner. The guide also provides sample documents for each section of your portfolio that you can copy, modify, and add to your personal portfolio. As a Hoopheads Pod listener, you can get your Coaching Portfolio Guide for just $25. Visit coachingportfolioguide.com/hoopheads to learn more.
Thanks for listening to the Hoopheads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.